I'm Dr. Brad Hafford. Welcome to Note Nook, where I take a close look at a banknote from the relatively recent past. In this series, I'm analyzing old paper money from around the world, paying close attention to one example in each episode. As an anthropologist, I'm more interested in what money says than what it's worth, and it says a great deal about the government that issued it and the people who used it. Today, we look at a 100 Kip Note issued in Laos in 1957. This particular example has seen heavy circulation, and it's not in great condition, but we can still learn a lot from it. So we begin by looking at the obverse, or the front of the note. This side typically emphasizes the issuing authority and often carries an image of an important person from the country. In this case, the important person is King Sisavang Vong. He's depicted here in a luxurious outfit covered in decorations. He was born in 1885 and was king of Luang Prabang, then a part of French Indochina, from 1904 to 1946. Then he became the first king of Laos, and in 1947 he presided over the establishment of a new constitution for the people. The French were beginning to loosen their colonial hold on the region, but their influence continued, and the Bank of France was commissioned to produce the 1957 100 Kip Note. Despite the fact that Sisavang Vong died in 1959, this note continued to circulate until 1962. Other notes with his image circulated up until 1974 under his son and successor, Sisavang Vitthana. Notably, the king's image is not in the center of the note. That is reserved for a stacked pair of royal chalices with the flat object lying atop. Laotian coins in 1952 show the same type of chalice, with the 1947 Constitution atop it, clearly emphasizing the combination of king and people controlling the country. On the note, the object is not inscribed to tell us that it is the Constitution, but it appears to be a stack of papers tied at both ends with a seal atop, while the king looks on as a benevolent overseer. Overseeing from the opposite edge is a set of 4 Naga Serpents, each one larger than the next in a towering line. Their rainbow-hued bodies and detailed faces are a standout element of this highly artistic note. Depictions of Nagas are very common in Laos. The mythical beings are said to live in the Mekong River and to be protectors of the Lao state. So their appearance on the note is something like the state balancing the king who looks on from the other side. A highly decorative column stands behind the Nagas, with an identical one standing behind the king. Their lotus-style capitals support the upper mesh framework, and their bases sprout from the floral designs below, all in a primary orange hue. Overlain on the column behind the king is a 3-headed white elephant topped by a staged cover or umbrella of sorts and standing on a stage platform. This is a complex symbol that represents the Lao kingdom, and it was emblazoned on the royal flag from 1952 to 1975. The elephant is called Erawan or Eravata, and in some legends was ridden by the Hindu god Indra. The same symbol is found in the watermark of the note. Now, a watermark is an area of the paper that appears blank, but shows an image in strong backlight. The watermark is a security protection. It allows users to check the note to ensure it's official. Even if counterfeiters manage to imitate the printing, they won't often be able to imitate the watermark as well. The blank area carrying this particular watermark is rather subtle, as it is integrated somewhat into the background of cloudy sky. It's a busy composition overall, but the sky makes it feel less crowded. The sky background and the intricately crowded details are also part of the note's protection. Subtle color gradations and high detail, like the king's patterned jacket and the architectural columns, were very difficult to copy before computer scanners and printers. To differentiate and identify the individual note, there's also a 9-digit serial number. Its final digits are repeated in a box at the bottom left, and the series number is indicated at the bottom right. Text on the obverse is almost entirely in the Lao language. This isn't surprising since the note circulated among the Lao people, but the French maintained interest and influence in the country. In fact, many French officials were involved in banking across Southeast Asia. We see evidence of this in the titles of the signatories. The obverse of a banknote often carries the signatures of financial officials, and here we have the governor, le gouverneur, and a censor, un censeur, of the bank. The bank in question was the Bank of Laos, which is precisely what is written in Lao at the very top of the note. Thanakan Ang Sad Lao. It is flanked by the Lao number 100, and in blue text is the value spelled out in Lao, Honi Kip. And beneath that, in smaller text, is a warning to counterfeiters that they will be punished according to the law. Now let's look at the reverse. The back of a note typically emphasizes the circulating value and the laws protecting it. This one has very little text, and all of it is in French. In fact, its content is identical to the Lao text on the obverse, except for the signatories and their titles. Text placement is slightly different, but Banque Nationale du Lao is near the top center, and the warning to counterfeiters lies at the bottom. The value is placed not only in the text, 100 kip, but also in the upper corners in Arabic numerals. The watermark window at left is much more visible here, as the background that it's set into more varied than that on the obverse. It's a highly detailed background of a tree in bloom alongside a potted plant. In the center background is a Buddhist temple. This particular temple sits in Vientiane, and it's known as Ho Phra Kyo, or the Temple of the Emerald Buddha. It was built in the 16th century and was the king's personal temple. In the foreground is a nearly photorealistic image of a Lao woman holding a decorated bowl of roses. She wears traditional clothing and represents the Lao people and their culture in the scene. While on the front we have a representation of royalty and authority, on the back we have a representation of the people and their dedication. Many banknotes follow this format, displaying multiple aspects of the country's culture and landscape together in a colorful panorama. In this case, the scene looks much like a painting. The paper is made primarily of cotton, but it has a distinctly woven look and feel, giving the impression of canvas. I find it to be peaceful and charming in spite of the staining and tears that have resulted from years of circulation. So what does this note tell us about Laos in 1957? The country itself was going through great change and would face much more in the next few years. Sisavang Vong had studied in France and had long been a proponent of the French in general. He was known as something of a playboy, having more than 40 children with 15 different wives. Nevertheless, while king of Luang Prabang, he began uniting many provinces that would come together to form the country of Laos. Most of the provinces were under the administration of the French at that time, but in 1945, after various World War II occupations, Lao nationalists attempted to declare independence. The king did not support the movement. When the Japanese surrendered in 1945, the French reoccupied the area and helped instate Vong on the throne of all of Laos. They allowed his new state to be semi-independent within the French Union. Thus, Sisavang Vong presided over a new constitution, issued on French models in 1947. In 1950, the Indo-Chinese Communist Party formed the Pathet Lao, who began a war against the French colonial forces with the aid of the Viet Minh. The French lost the First Indochina War and signed a peace accord for Laos at the Geneva Conference in 1954. Allowing it to become a fully independent constitutional monarchy. But French influence had not left the country. French language was still widely in use, and the French themselves helped issue the new banknotes. Sisavang Vong had been king of all of Laos for 10 years by the time the 100 Kip note with his image was issued. 2 years after the issuance, the king died, and one of his sons, Sisavang Vitthana, succeeded him. By 1960, rebellions broke out anew, and Laos fell into civil war, with the Royal Laotian government fighting the Soviet-backed Pathet Lao. In what Americans call the Vietnam War, and Vietnamese call the American War, roughly 1961 to 1975, Laos became key for supply lines to North Vietnam. During the period, the U.S. dropped around 2 million tons of bombs on the country. An estimated 80 million bombs remain unexploded in Laos today. In 1975, the Pathet Lao formed the Lao People's Democratic Republic and forced King Sisavang Vitthana to abdicate. The note's peaceful image and depiction of a steadfast and solemn ruler balancing royal decree with people's constitution is therefore somewhat misleading. It's not surprising that war is not evident in the fields of subtle clouds and flowering trees. Instead, the colors and design reflect Lao culture. But at the time, Laos, and much of Southeast Asia, were on the precipice of a horrible war. I hope you enjoyed looking at this banknote with me. I'm Dr. Brad Hafford. Join me again next time on Note Nook, part of my series, Money Talks.